Welcome all. Bienvenidos a todos y a todas. Ya está Andrea en la interpretación en español. Good afternoon to you all. Thank you for joining us in this mystery webinar. It's not very mysterious because you can see all the names on the screens already. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce all our panelists today. And the idea is that we jump straight into questions from the almost 30 grassroots coaches that we've got joining us today. Gibi, under 20s basketball coach and Reading Rockets coach, Commonwealth Games assistant coach. Alan Keane, welcome. How are you, mate? It's good to see you. Let me open your audio. There you go. How's everything, mate? You okay?
Yeah, everything's great, buddy. Everything's great. I think I was just muted, so.
Fantastic. Well, great to have you on board. We're going to go to a performance pathway coach development developer at England Netball, Sarah Green. How are you, Sarah?
Oh, I was waiting for you to do it, and then I was trying to do it as well. I'm good. How are you?
Good. Very good. Great to have you here. By the way, I'm using your LinkedIn profiles status. So if you haven't updated it in a while, then some odd things might come on. We're going to go to sports skill acquisition specialist, Dr. Learning, Dr. Ed. How are you? There he is.
Yes. Hi, Juan. Good. Very good. Great to see everybody. Lovely Sunday evening here.
Fantastic. Great cap, by the way. You're rocking your cap. I'm loving it.
That's to hide I got rid of the quarantine growth. It was a bit drastic, so it's more
fantastic. We're going to go to a practitioner, researcher, speaker, consultant in sports coaching. He's a reader at Leeds, Beckett University and ICCE. He's never been introduced with his real name. He's always Sergio, but his name is Sergio. Sergio Lara Bercial, welcome.
Hi everyone, buenas tardes, buenas tardes, ¿no? Buenas tardes todos. Un placer estar aquí. A real pleasure to be here with you and looking forward to learning a lot today.
Fantastic. Sergio is going to make Andrea's life a lot easier. We're going to go to senior professor at Winchester University, and he's going to tick the box around cycling today. There he is at the beach. I didn't expect anything less. How are you, Richard Cheetham MBE?
I've had to go to the beach because I don't have a bookshelf like everybody else.
Looks smart.
I just have cycling magazines and balloons, so I thought I'd better head down to the beach, build a sandcastle, and put on my very drastic headphones. But I use them for my private jet. Good evening, everybody.
Great to have you here, Cheats. We're going to go to head of coaching at UK Coaching, Mr. Nick Leved. How are you, mate?
Hold on. There we go. Afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I'm currently on barbecue duty, so feeding time at the zoo here at the moment, so I'll probably be nipping in and out, but I don't have a bookshelf either today, so but once I've fed the animals, I'll probably jump back on later on.
Fantastic. We're going to go to one of the two co-founders of the Magic Academy, former National Development Pathway Manager at the RFU, Mr. John Fletcher. How are you, mate?
Hi, gang. How's everybody? Hope everybody's well. Had a great day. Looking forward to catching up.
Having the cap as well. He's going.
World champions, mate.
I'm going to go to his better half. That's how he's normally referred as. The other Magic Academy co-founder and people development, like he says in his LinkedIn, Mr. Russell Enshaw from the bed. No dressing gown today, which is an upgrade already. Do I need to do it for you?
No, you need to do it for everyone. It's good that you've worked it out. It's only 10 people in. Another 40 to go, and you've worked it out. Top work, mate. Well done.
You're on mute, Russell.
Thank you for the encouragement. Thank you for the encouragement.
You're on mute.
Thanks for having me, Juan. It's great to be on. I'm excited to be in such esteemed company.
This is going to be awesome. I'm going to go to the founder at Coaching for Potential and former assistant women's sevens coach at USA Rugby. There he is. How are you, Warren Abrahams?
All good. Thank you for having me. Not sure how I made it onto the panel, but I'm here. So thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you. Pleasure to have you. We're going to go to the English national talent coach at GB Canoeing, Imogen. How are you? It's great to meet you, by the way. We've never seen each other. There she is.
Hi, it's good to meet you all. I'm really excited to have a bit of a chat today. I've spoken with Craig, who's we've put some ideas up together already, so hopefully we'll be able to get some words in.
Fantastic. I haven't introduced him yet, so he doesn't exist, so he's not here yet. Now we're going to go podium coach canoe slalom for British Canoeing. You've got to talk us through this podium coach role, Mr. Phil Morris, aka.
I'm just pleased, evening everyone. I'm pleased Rusty's made it out of the bath and at least into some clothes on his bed. That's reassuring. Yeah, I don't know what the podium coach is either, but it says it on the job title, which is what you asked for, Juan. But yeah, not important to me. Look forward to connecting tonight.
Sarah Kelleher, England under-18 lead coach and founder of Flourishing Consulting. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I knew I was going to mess up in the first 10 minutes, and there you go.
Not at all. It's lovely to be on. Thank you very much, and with such a great group of people. Really looking forward to it. Thanks, Iman.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to have you, and apologies again. So, as I was saying, we're going to try to discuss this huge topic. Sergio, I'm going to come to you. I know part of your organization's mission is very similar. You talk about a holistic approach. Do you want to kick us off?
I guess it's a bit of the holy grail, really. This idea of athlete-centered coaching or participant-centered coaching. From my point of view, a very, very delicate question, because it really implies that as a coach, you have to let go of your own ego and needs and wants. And I know from experience that that's a very hard thing to do, having been through it many, many times. So I think one of the things that I'd love to discuss with people today is this idea of, is it an either or approach? Is it a continuum? How do we navigate this athlete-centered coaching really for the benefit of the athlete? But again, just to throw another spanner in the works there, how does that work in team sports when you're coaching multiple athletes at the same time? Which is the case in my sport, obviously. Yeah, so looking forward to that idea of how do we let go of our own needs and wants to put ourselves at the service of someone else?
Brilliant. Thanks for kicking us off. I'm going to start with what is mostly individual sports. I know they got a team of people behind them. So, Craig, Imogen, do you want to chip in?
Yeah, sure thing, Juan. Yeah, very privileged to do a lot of one-to-one work, I guess, with a huge team behind us. I guess to run off Sergio there, I would say there's some principles at play, but it's pretty individual. I've not met a human clone yet, so each experience is novel and new. I think it is a continuum in terms of that level of how they present in their stage of development, their experiences to that point, and the depth of understanding that you can gain from the individual to help understand that. And the continuum is probably around that sort of challenge and support, how many and what invitations to lead look like, and what's right at the right time, that sense of who's in front of you, not just as a global person, but even how they're presenting day to day. I think it can look very different and what can be sort of athlete or person-centered approach for one might look very different to another, but it might be equally as sort of stretching and creative in that way too. Imogen?
I think it's quite an interesting subject area, because I'm really lucky that I get to work with athletes once they're kind of just coming out of club level. So when they're within the club level, a lot of it is you're having to just do something that's hopefully fit for purpose, rather than individualizing it and having that complete athlete centered. by the time they get to me, I'm doing a lot of one-to-one working. So it's easy to make it very athlete-centered and making sure that they are getting exactly what they need. And it's transferring the kind of the abilities for them to learn as much as I possibly can, so that when they do step into different environments, they understand what they as an athlete want and need, and then it's working out how I can fulfill that as much as possible.
Cool. I'm trying to work out the translation, which it seems not to be working. I'm going to get to that. But Ed and Cheeth, you both worked in golf and cycling before. Any thoughts around what Craig and Imogen were just commentating on? I think you can do it yourself now.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because that's a great topic. And as everyone has said before, it's so different with each person that you work with. I think there's an interesting trend that I would see in different sports, how the traditions or the cultures of that sport seem to impact on some behaviors, that they feel that they have to behave in a certain way because of what the sport has maybe informed them through the experiences of those who've gone before them. And I think that's an interesting one, especially in the golf space where I'm at the moment, is that there's a lot of things that people do that when they're challenged on it, they begin to realize that, oh, I don't have to behave in this way, and I can have a lot more and put a lot more of myself into the work that I do, which is interesting because even though it's an individual sport, a lot of the people I work with and work for, they practice with friends, and they practice with people in small groups. So there is a lot of engagement and interaction with other players as well. But it is an interesting one because, as Craig said, there's no clones out there. And there's so many different individuals, and yet sometimes the cultures or the traditions of the sport can have a real impact on how people feel they should be behaving. And I think that's something I find that I'm happy to and interested in delving into, to try and break away from what maybe the cultures and the traditions of the sport have been telling them.
Kids?
Yeah, I liked what Craig said about the clones. That's definitely something I'll take away for tonight in terms of coaching. I think that, from my experience, it's about time, making people feel they have been given time. They've been given a voice, so very much they can contribute, and it's a dialogue and they're heard. I always like the phrase, which success is an individual measure. I think we have to look across the people we coach and recognize in those people that what one person achieves shouldn't necessarily be compared with somebody else. It's what that person couldn't do yesterday but can do today. And I think I agree absolutely with what Ed says about the word culture. Do we have a culture in our environment where we are focusing on the individuals but not losing sight, as Sergio says, as a team sport and the challenge around that? And so I suppose the two things I'd say to coaches would be to allow more time and to make sure that you are mindful of how people feel in that environment. They are part of it.
Thanks, Cheeth. Warren, I'm going to come to you. You obviously work in team sports in rugby union, but you do a lot of one-on-one stuff with little units within a team as well.
Yeah, no, there's some great points there, definitely. I love the sort of the behavioral one as well. But for me, from my experience in particular, if you look at coaching at the elite end, for instance, very much team sport, and how it obviously works there is you selected individuals that fits into your team. So I suppose from that perspective is you got to be clear on how you want that team to particularly perform, but then have the capabilities to attend to those individual needs within your team. But then from probably an academy background, it's probably where it's more exciting, because it's, although you prepare for a team game, your focus is really on the individual. So yeah, I was properly having that sort of understanding of what does this team needs, but most importantly, what those individuals need. And I probably enjoyed it more spending within those academy pathway, because then you can really explore those individual needs. Because as we, and people might agree or disagree, as you progress into the top end spectrum, very much coaches select teams based on their natural biases at times, but still the importance of that individual to ultimately his individual needs to maximize that human potential within that team is very much as important. So for me, it's a little bit of both, but the main emphasis would be on how do I maximize that individual's human potential to ultimately succeed in whichever team they participate in.
Nick?
Well, I think the point that I took from that earlier on that kind of sings to my view of the world is about the voice and the input from the people that we're working with. I think we have to get away from thinking that this whole thing is about us as the coach. You know, the coach is king, the coach is queen. It's not about the coach. It's not about the coach. And we have to get more to the culture where a co-created environment where everybody gets the chance to input into it. And when we start to look at the new generations coming through, Generation Y, Generation Z, young people today want an input into matters that are about them. And I think in years gone by, when it was the coach did to the athletes, we've got to move past that now. And coaches have to park their egos and ask the people that they're working with, what do you think? What did you like? What don't you like? What do we want more of? What do we want less of? How do we make this an awesome environment for everybody that we can be part of? So the big thing for me there was all about voice. You know, we have to start to listen to the people that we're working with.
Brilliant. And I'm going to come to you, Alan, with our first question. Juan Martin in Chile wants to know, when we're talking about the culture of a team, which I know you work around it quite a lot, and regardless of the technical and tactics and X's and O's and all those things, what happens when the players actually have one interpretation of what they actually need and what the team actually needs in terms of what the coach is actually looking for?
Well, I think that ties into actually a point I was going to make in reference to what Ed said about culture and the tradition of the sport and, you know, and previous coaching experiences. So from my situation, I wear two hats. I've got an under-19 academy program, and I've got, well, three hats really, if you throw the national team in there. And then I have to sign 6 or 7 pro players each year, and because it's a low budget pro league where the players leave after 1 year. So I'm constantly, like, even I know it's coming again this year, having to kind of reinvent the wheel with a new crop of players each year, be it national team, be it the semi-pro team. And one thing I find is, like, I've got my way or desire to coach, and we can call it an athlete-centered approach, we can call it a person-centered approach. It's got commonalities amongst it, where Nick's just talked about it there, where we give the athlete a voice and a choice, and it's a collaborative kind of approach between the coach and the player. But what I find, and this somewhat ties into the question one, and I'll specifically answer the question a bit more in detail, but it ties into it. What I find, especially with these players who were signing from the States, who've been through a 4-year college program, or they've played overseas in Australia or whatever in a pro league, they're coming in with predetermined expectations of how I'm going to coach them. And and they come in with predetermined expectations of how our culture will be. And I battle is the wrong word. That's a challenge I have every single year. So to answer that question, I always start off every season with telling the players more about who I am as a coach, why I coach the way I do. And it's very much me trying to get them to see the value of me coaching you this way, which is very much built around them being better decision makers, long-term, and trying to get them to connect to the long-term picture, the bigger picture, the long-term value of me coaching you in a way where I'm not always going to give you the answer, or I'm not always going to crack the whip to get you motivated. I'm going to do it a different way, which I believe will have a sustainable impact on you long term. So I very much have to not package it. I very much have to educate the players we bring in, whether they're under 16s, whether they're under 19s, or whether they're senior players who played for 8 years. I have to give them what it's going to look like before I start. Same with the culture stuff. So for us, what's our culture? Our culture is very much, I would define it like this, actually, Juan. Judge our culture by the interaction between the player and player, not between the player and the coach and the coach and the player. Mm-hmm. I would like our culture to be measured, assessed, and defined on the type of interactions our players have with each other during performance under pressure. When we're losing, when we're behind, when there's a bad moment. That would define our culture. Now, how do you build it? Again, it's back to, well, this is the culture I see us flourishing in, but it's not going to be immediate. It's going to be long-term. And then when there's a conflicting attitude with it, it's a patience thing. For me, it's, again, I've got to go back and look at myself and think, did I truly sell the value? I sold the value to these 6, but these 6 guys are not buying it. So now it's an investment of time, one-to-one. It's showing them what that looks like. And it's also probably meeting them halfway, like meet them where they're at and remove the expectation. Well, actually, he's a bad culture guy. No, he's not a bad culture guy. I've done a bad job of actually getting him to buy into what I think the good culture is. And it's having that approach as opposed to label him bad culture guy. No, bad delivery coach. Find another way to get him to buy in. So that would be my answer to that question, Juan.
Thanks, Alan. I'm quickly going to send a message to Andrea. Andrea, fíjate si puedes sacarte los auriculares, pues no se está escuchando. A ver si ahí se empieza a escuchar la traducción. Sarah, Kels, I'm going to come to you. I know you're big on culture around your girls and what you try to develop in your camps. Any thoughts around team culture? I know that's a big question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would absolutely echo what Alan was saying, and very much from where I come from, I talk about creating an environment where players really truly flourish. And when I talk about truly flourishing, that's when you can really express your own individuality. And I think when you're able to express yourself, you can be your best and play to your best, and you'll take risks under pressure. And I think within a team sport as well, obviously we've got a group of individuals, but there's a joy of playing a team sport, of thinking and connecting with others that really untaps people's potential. And how do you create and really celebrate that connection between a group of players, I think is really important. The whole idea of co-created environment where they own the environment, you're a facilitator as a coach, you know, absolutely, there's no place for ego. You're there in service of the journey that the players are on, and how do they really take ownership and co-create that environment. So if I just look at, you know, what we've done through lockdown with the England under-18s, we've created environments where we've gone on to, we obviously have to move to a virtual world, and, you know, share the journey that we're planning to go on and get all of their ideas. And they came up with amazing ideas. And so we created 5 different groups. One group was about telling our story. One was about fundamental fitness. One was around daily positivity, skillfulness. And each group then owned ideas that they co-created. And we had leaders appointed to each of those, and on a weekly basis, new leaders. So you're creating an environment where constantly it's the voice of the players that are really joining together what's happening, and you're having lots of rich conversations with players about their ideas and giving them a call. What do you think of this? What's happening? And it's really the interaction amongst them. They're always coming back with their own ideas. And next thing, you've got a program that's been really run by them and owned by them within the premise of obviously the expectations of what success looks like. I think, you know, certainly with an under-18 environment, I see a key role of helping players to learn and to find their own self-motivation. And it's definitely, you know, not crack the whip, the stick approach, as Alan was saying as well. It's around them finding that. And some players will find it now, and some players will find it in the future. So you have to go on that long-term journey with them and help unlock those motivations.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kels. I don't want to leave anyone for the end, so I'm going to come to Sarah. Rusty and Fletch together. You can fight it out. Sherry's asking here, do you have any strategies or support educational initiatives that have been successful to get those coaches who have actually a difficulty demonstrating humility and adapting to player-centered support?
Can you just say that question again? Sorry, I was trying to unmute.
Yeah, so I think what Sherry is after, she might be dealing with some individuals in her organization that are not behind this whole player-centered culture or approach. So any strategies within your role? Obviously, you try to develop coaches within the Netball pathway. So anything that could get them to buy in, I guess.
It's interesting because, like, listening to what everyone said, because obviously I've come from like 2 team sports really. So I'm working in netball as a non-netball specialist. So I'm a football person. So that's where I've spent most of my career. And actually, like, being involved in like performance football, I recognise now I was never a head coach. I was like an assistant as part of the coaching team, and I kind of understand like how it feels to be in that situation where you've got multiple like senior athletes, and actually but there's something to be won or lost, and it can feel really difficult to try to find that balance of understanding them, prioritizing what's going on, knowing them as individuals. Going to netball then, which obviously there's much smaller squad, but they really do a lot more individual, I think, because the positions are a little bit more structured, a little bit more rigid, and there's a little bit more focus on kind of working within that individual space. But not necessarily like them bringing that back to the whole. So it's kind of fascinating from my perspective. But in terms of being part of like a coaching team, one of the things that I really struggled with last season was just the balance of asking them what's going on is not enough. It's really trying to remember. So what we did to try to combat that, because as coaches it's really hard, like we're planning the session, carrying our own working days and and all of that stuff. So we divided the team up, and so each of us became like a key person for. So we did it by unit actually. So we took a unit and we kind of became their touch point. So it didn't feel overwhelming for the head coach. And one of the things that I had to remember on a continual basis was no matter how important I felt like our target or our goal was, and they, I believed, understood it, at times they really just wanted to find the sessions like really, really enjoyable and engaging. And at times I think that it's really easy to forget that. It's really easy to want to plan a new session every week and think it's interesting for them. But sometimes they like routine, they like familiarity, and they just want to have fun. So like one of the best things I purchased last year was this thing from B&M Bargains, which was like a head basket game. And it cost me like £3. And every week they were like, can play that game, can play that game, can play that game. And I'm just like, wow. But I think it's really easy as we progress as coaches to forget the fundamental reason why the athletes started.
Brilliant. I believe that is the national sport in Northumberland. Is that right, Fletch?
Yeah, mate, we got lots of national sports up in Northumberland. I don't have a huge amount to add to that, to be perfectly honest. I mean, ideally, what I do think we've probably got to try and encourage coaches to get into little gangs. I don't mean gangs in a bad way, I mean gangs in a good way, just sort of hanging out with each other, challenging each other. I know lots of governing bodies are doing some cool stuff around it. Maybe some governing bodies are still a little bit too formal around their environments around learning and a bit too structured. I think a good thing possibly to do that I've seen work really well is for the coach to sort of highlight the stuff that they think's important. So what's the top 5 or 6 skills, and then maybe the athletes or the players to do exactly the same. Say where they match a bit. Maybe then order them as well. So actually put stuff in order. What do people think's most important? I've seen that stuff work pretty well around trying to build the coach's awareness around where they are compared to where their players or athletes are.
Cool.
Rusty will have some magic. I know we've left him to last, I think.
Last but not least, that's for sure.
Yeah, I just wrote some stuff down that probably, if I gave everyone a week so that all their players own their own development, what would they do? If I gave you a week and next week the players ran the whole week, what would you do in this week? If you brought a naive expert, if you brought someone in from another world and asked them, so the other thing I would do that Fletcher spoke about, well, maybe get someone to come in and go, these are the 5 things I noticed. These are the 5 things I think are most important in your environment, but have someone who's never been there before. Bring in Richard Cheetham, get him to bring double balloons from Redcar. And there he is, of course he is. I don't think you have time not to do this. And people say, oh, it takes ages, like kids are in sports clubs for years, they're in schools for years. The stuff why I think it's important, choice, major motivator, peer-to-peer feedback, much more impactful than an old man from Middlesbrough's feedback. And also if I asked everyone on here, if you knew back then what you know now as a coach, would you have been a better player? Then the answer is yes. So all the stuff people have spoken about, getting people to think like coaches would be critical for me. And yeah, the other stuff that I'm definitely curious about, and Kellers and Fletcher and other people will be way better than me at this, is like just understanding people's story. I know Dr. Ed put on there, I mean, you got to understand what got people to where they are, and what's the highs, what's the lows, how did they come through them, what's the history of this team, what got it to here. Fletcher's nudged me towards a guy called Owen Eastwood. I would recommend looking him up for people. I got a nod off Dr. Ed, which is like pretty cool because he's also got a baseball cap on backwards, which is absolutely freaking me out. So that was just stuff I wrote down.
He's got the well behind him as well. Ed, you had an interesting point here in the chat. I think it's worthwhile sharing that, mate.
Well, it's just to pick up on the point that Alan made. That idea, it's a balancing act constantly. Because I think a lot of the people on here, we all appreciate that the more we can remove our ego, and Sergio said it at the start, it's one of the most difficult things that we do, just to remember that it is not about us. It's not about me, the coach. And the more I can get myself out of the way, the more likely I'm going to be able to hear their story. And again, I think it was Fleck said about the time, or maybe it was somebody else, just the time, the patience. That's something that has massively impacted on my coaching over the last couple of years. To even when I'm in the professional domain, and yes, livelihoods are at stake, to actually not put the time pressure front and center. And the more I do that, the more I realize we have time. But when it becomes all about the time, you always will run out of time. And it's just to constantly remind myself of just be more patient, be more aware, and be more open to hearing, or even hearing something they'll say, or seeing something that they'll do, because it might be some nonverbal communication that will actually take you on a really important path with that athlete. And I've like so much written down already, but they're the key things that I'm taking from this. Is just that patience, that patience to allow things to emerge, but then also to make sure that when you're making decisions about what am I going to go after, that you don't rush those decisions, that you allow things even to settle in your own head before you think, okay, actually let's go after this idea, this thought, or this concept that just contributed to our space. I think that's something, and I love that term that Rusty just mentioned there, that naive expert. I've done a lot of that over the last couple of years, just asking a random coach who I've met somewhere and saying, have you ever done this? No, that's not my sport. Brilliant. I'd love you to come in and have a look at some of the things I do, on the condition that we'll jump straight into the good stuff afterwards. I'm not looking for, I really liked and all this. I don't need you to pad it. I don't need you to soften the blow. I actually would like it to be, let's get straight into it straight afterwards. And I love that idea of a naive expert, because they come in with such a completely different lens to what you will have automatically have developed your own little biases. I certainly can't help it happening every so often. And the more often I can get someone like that to come in, the more I can just clean house and get a better perspective on what I've been doing all along.
Love it. James, can jump in.
Yeah, just Craig put about the challenge of the why. I thought was really good point, and something that I used because I like to challenge myself. And we do very much with these student surveys, which are done after the year's completed. Students look back on and they'd like this and they'd like that, and so I do it in reverse. So get them to do. I say to them, what do you want to have a look back on? So we do a reflection on the year that hasn't happened, and I ask them to write what they would like it to contain, and that gives you a real insight in terms of what their expectations are. So, you know, Alan's comments around culture and what people walk into, I quite like to know what they're thinking, what their expectations are. It gives me an idea then of what they believe they're about to experience, and also what they want to experience. And so we do this shared responsibility, which is, I call above the line and below the line. And above the line is what they contribute, and below the line is what their expectations of me. And we look back every 2 weeks on where we are. And so it's like a shared responsibility, but it's very useful to have an insight with the people you teach and coach as to what they would like to look back on. And, you know, Sarah mentions enjoyment, fun is always there. Whatever level you work at, it's always there. So I found that useful. I don't know if that would be helpful for others to do that. Rather than do a survey after the year, you know, preempt it by what they would like it to contain, what they think they feel is important for them.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jed. I'm going to bring in Mariano from Bahia Blanca in Argentina. He's going to ask you in Spanish, Sergio, and if you can be kind enough to translate onto English, then we'll go from there. Mariano, ¿cómo estás? Ahí te dejo que le preguntes a Sergio y a todos.
Si creen que, digamos, si creen que esta metodología del jugador, digamos, centrado en el jugador, digamos, de educación, este método de centrado en el jugador o en el niño, se aplica en el sistema educativo de Inglaterra y de Estados Unidos. ¿Y qué cantidad de educadores, de coach u organizaciones aplican esta metodología en sus países?
Yeah, so for the English-speaking guys, the question is about whether the methodologies that we are talking about, or the type of pedagogies around being learner-centered, if you want, if those are two things, exclusive to the UK and the US or English-speaking countries, and also if we if how much is that applied in our countries, really. So I'm gonna kick us off, really, because I actually had that as a question, really. I mean, I said I wanted to learn a lot today. I'm just writing like mad. But one of the things that really got me thinking was the idea of, okay, one thing is to know or to say the right words, because I hear coaches all the time saying, I am athlete-centered, or I want to be athlete-centered, because it's become the common language now. It's out there. It's like long-term development as well. You know, we all think long-term, okay? But I wonder how much that's actually real, how much of that we're actually doing ourselves. And we need to be a little bit more humble, I think, in admitting to what extent we're actually achieving that athlete-centeredness, really. And like it's been said today a lot, is to what degrees do we go at different times with different people in different situations. So in answer to the question, so to me that's a key thing, really, that I think we need to be very mindful of. We may be using the right language, but we might not be doing it. And I think that's what I like what Richard was saying about testing it all the time. I think it's so important that very regularly we sit down with individuals and with groups and ask them, how am I doing? Because otherwise we can think that because we either have an explicit philosophy that says that we are athlete-centered and we use the right language, and we even seem to be doing the right things, it might not be having the right effect on the people that we are working with. So we have to be really humble and constantly ask for that feedback, really.
Thank you, Sergio. That's brilliant. I'm going to go to Imogen and Craig. Sorry to take you as a two, but you come from the same sports. You both work around Olympic athletes. Someone here in the chat wants to know what's the role of pressure in all this? Because obviously you guys got to go and perform. So any thoughts around pressure? When does it become higher than the athlete-centered approach? Does it become higher at times? Any thoughts around that, guys?
For me, I would say that it's kind of making sure that it's right for the individual. There's some athletes that absolutely want to go and do a race time trial once a week, every week, and there are some people that just can't cope with that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. So pressure's really, it's important for them to experience, but it does still have to be individualized, because you want to get the most out of the athletes. If you spend all your time putting them in an environment that isn't going to aid their learning and their improvement, that's just going to put a halt on things. So being able to make sure that pressure comes in, because it's really important, especially for the younger athletes. If they don't have that, then they won't be able to cope with it when they are pushing their way up to the top levels. But it has to be done in a smart, shared belief way that works for the individual as well.
Cool, thanks.
I'd agree with that, Imogen. I think pressure invites an opportunity to understand people as well. I think the precursor to sort of delivering, well, we phrase it as simulation training, because I've found that I can't assume what pressure is to one person or another and how it's experienced. It's very individual. So I think the whole notion of pressure, or how people perceive their relative comfort or discomfort in any one context, is an opportunity to understand people deeper, which gives you a layer into the person-centered approach as well. I've certainly found the effectiveness of simulation training to only be really truly valuable once that person has a greater understanding of themselves. Once they understand themselves better, they know how that relates to the end in mind in terms of what you're preparing to do, be that the game day or the race for us. And then that gives an opportunity that we've heard a lot about co-creation tonight. I think they can really co-create an environment where they're willing to and seeking out what some may label as pressure, or we would label as simulated experiences of the end in mind.
Cool, thank you guys. I'm going to take you down a rabbit hole that I'm not sure we're ever going to be able to come out of. But Ian has thrown a bit of a bomb here in the chat, and he's asking about the role of parents in the whole approach. I'm intrigued to know your thoughts, Rusty. I know you love the parents on the touchline.
I actually just wrote the word down. I wrote down what would make you wobble, which I think is a good question, to understand what makes people wobble. And then I wrote down parents, because the reality is you can have all the best will in the world and then the parents turn up, don't they? So I think having a strategy around chatting to parents, even as simple as if you've got some problem parents and you generally want to avoid those people, that they're the first people you speak to. Fletcher will definitely know more stuff than me, but I just think we need to, in a playful way, support them. They have good intentions. Often they don't understand that the stuff they do might not be that helpful. There's loads of good people out there doing way better work on this than me. So Richard Shorter, working with parents in sport. Lots of good ideas that people can use. Just even, I know Gary Johnson in hockey has a WhatsApp group with the parents on, and just tells them what they're doing in training so the parents don't freak out. One of the coaches I know does, at the end of training, does a question with a Q&A competition between the parents and the kids on the session. So the parents are so concentrating on trying to win the quiz that they stop shouting abuse at kids. But it also is a way of trying to get them to understand that actually it's not that complicated, and they might step over the white line and become a coach, or a parent coach type thing. Fletcher would probably have better answers than me.
Yeah, he's just thrown a couple of tips there on the chat for everybody to read, which is great. Come on, Nick. I can see you anxious between your sips of gin and tonic to come on board on this one.
Yeah. It is gin and tonic. Good spot. Apologies for coming back on this. Look, I think parents is one of those subjects that is a bit of a taboo one, and generally it always comes from a good place, and the loud minority are the ones that get the bad rap, because most parents, from my experiences, are decent people and just want the best for their kids. My experiences for working from a previous life in the football world is, and doing some research with England's senior internationals, after the game, the first person they speak to or want to chat through their performance with is mum or dad. Like, so we used to get to see, well, up to under 18s, we'd engage with their parents, and after that, we kind of forget about them, like they suddenly don't exist, because that 18-year-old that's now 19, all of a sudden is, you know, out in the free world and doesn't speak to their parents. Like they're not a cheetah or a leopard. You know, generally we kind of still have that bond. So elite seniors always still speak to their parents. So make sure you engage with parents. Don't just stick them in the corner and tell them to be silent, because as you're right, you're spot on. If they don't know what's going on, they guess and they fill in the blanks. And often they get it wrong. So give them information, explain what you're doing, why you're doing it, but definitely engage with them.
I've been at a football club before that the parents had a yellow line in the parking lot and they couldn't cross the line, and the kids had to walk into the big stadium by themselves. No word of a lie. No word of a lie. Alan, I've got one for you. Very strategic game, yours. Very strategic sport, yours. Juan wants to know that he's going to put you in a scenario where you can see what they need to change. It's a playoff game. It's for the points. It's for the cup. Do you tell them? Do you let them go? Do you let them learn from the moment? What would be your approach in that scenario? Again, this is a playoff game. You can see what's going on. They cannot see what's going on.
Me personally, I'm jumping right in there. I'm giving them the answer. I'm cutting straight to the chase. And that's the teams I work with. And I heard somebody tell a story one time about, he traveled to the States and he observed some high-level NCAA Division I college coaches coaching and practice. And I'm giving you this little story because I think it aligns with where I'm at this moment in time. And he watched both of these coaches in practice, and both were really calm. And, you know, calm was contagious. The players were calm. It was a high-level practice. And then he got to the games, and he watched both coaches from behind the bench. And he said one of the coaches was up and kicking and screaming and cracking the whip from the opening tip to the final buzzer. And he said the other coach was very calm throughout and was very, you know, helping the players solve the problem. He wasn't dictating every action, telling them where to go, what to do. You know, you could see he was letting the players figure it out a little bit for himself. But when it got to the last 4 or 5 minutes of a close game, he started to assert himself more as the coach, giving the problems, giving the solutions, because in that moment he felt they needed him. So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about a bit earlier. I think Craig put a great question up on the chat, like who decides whether it's athlete-centered, who decides the environment? And my thoughts and feelings on that align to the answer to this question. I think it's a sliding scale. And I think the master coach knows what button to press at the right time in order to facilitate the need of that player. So for example, for us, our more experienced players, like, you know, one of them who's been played a long time and had a lot of experience and probably above the level of our league, but he's coming to the end of his career. I never felt the need to jump in and save him very often. Whereas a rookie, a new person coming in, I had to troubleshoot with them more. So for me, it's a sliding scale, and the master coach, I think, gets that right at the right time and presses the right button. But for me, to answer that question, the game is on the line. It's a playoff game. I'm giving them the solution from right off the bat, maybe. And that's where I'm at, you know. But yeah.
Interesting. Sarah, you had an interesting story with your team. Some players being ill the day before, not feeling that well before having to go and perform. Any thoughts of interventions around this? Would you go and fix their problems? Would you let them be?
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely around that spectrum. So when is it coach-led and when is it player-led, and that you have to play to that. And it depends in different environments. So let's say with an England under 18, we're still in a crunch moment to win a bronze medal. Do I go in and give them the answers? Actually, no, I probably don't. I probably say, actually, this is a massive learning for them. Right now, if they shift their shape into a back four, rather than stay in their kind of back three, they'll have the answers. And actually, maybe what you do is you talk to some players on the bench and you start asking and probing questions. So it feels like you're guiding the conversation for them to come up with their answer. Because again, I think there's a balance. You want them to succeed in the moment because that's key. And actually, we know that, you know, through, you know, putting a medal around your neck at that age, there's a great opportunity to grow. But equally, if you're taking away the learning from that to just do it to win, I think you've got to balance that as a coach. I think if you create environments where, going back to that idea of, we do a lot of training around practice for scenarios. So like that example that you talked about, we were going out to play the Germans and to play for a bronze medal, and our captain got sick the night before, and then everyone started vomiting into buckets on the sideline. And we've done a lot of training. We talk about calm the chaos, finding our flow, calm the case. We've been here before, we've done it. It mightn't have been exactly that scenario, but how do you train them for those scenarios so that they feel comfortable even though the situation is very uncomfortable? I find it's really interesting coaching at a senior level with players in a Premier League. The older players are often very used to the tell. So they come to you looking for answers because that's how they've grown up. Younger players are more malleable, I think, at this point. So then trying to change that culture to them taking more ownership can be more challenging because they want you to give them more answers. And I think, again, the mastery of a coach is how can you create an environment where you meet them where they are, but you also guide them to start exploring that more and putting the sort of the structures around it where they actually do take more ownership. Ultimately, so many of the decisions are made in the moment, and you want to develop that within your players.
Cool, thanks, girls. Warren, anything to add on this one? You're there. It's a semi-final in the World Circuit. Do you tell them? Do you leave them? Do you say something for them to bite?
So perhaps if I can use an example. So we had this scenario in Sydney not too long ago. So last play of the game, we had a penalty, right midfield penalty. The score was 19-15 maybe, based on the lessons we've learned throughout the tournament. So far, every time we had a penalty, we scored first phase from it. So there you have a great decision. I could see from the side what was happening. So we've had a number of different options from these penalties. So I'm on a sideline, and Australia set us a nice trap. They give us a flat 7, so you can instantly see what the two girls are deciding based on off the cuff. They were going to kick the ball, which obviously partly excites me on the sideline. However, I can also see the trap that Australia is setting ourselves. So I could there intervene and point it out from the sideline. However, I wanted to see what was going to happen. So they took the penalty. First and foremost, I'll probably hold that but a little bit. What happens, he takes the penalty, bam, kicks it over the top, shanks it, Aussie cats it, kicks it out. We lose the game. Everyone comes back. As you can imagine, everyone's annoyed in the training room because now all of a sudden we've played outside our system because kicks is never in our system apparently. However, so to bring them back to the moment and recreate like these different options. How many options have we got from these kicks or from these penalties? And they'll give you all these options. Kicking was one of them as well. So the question I immediately then asked is, how many times in the last probably 6 weeks, 7 weeks prior to that competition did we kick the ball? No one could give me an answer. We only kicked it twice. That particular girl kicked it one, and someone else kicked it. She kicked it, she shanked it in training. Great spot of space, but got it slightly wrong. And then the other one had a great kick in training. So really there in a nutshell was the lesson was never around. I obviously could have intervened because we wanted to win the game. However, it was about the end goal. What is these lessons we learned from that particular moment, because it was about Olympics. We were preparing for the Olympics. That was the summit. So we have to learn these tough lessons. The big lesson was for the team to understand although I over and over tried to encourage these kicking concepts, no one really backed themselves to have a kick. So we can't jump into these particular moments in big games and then all of a sudden you pull out the miracle ball that you've never practiced before. So I had to find a way to create this learning moment for them. And as you can imagine, although right after that particular event, everything was going to shit anyway, because the way we were playing, the way that we were training wasn't working, really based on that particular moment. But taking that moment where you've sort of created this, and straight after that, bam, training all of a sudden looked completely different from the number of kicks we were going in, and all of a sudden we're scoring kick scores in the next tournaments. But yeah, so it's probably linking to that pressure point is although there was a huge amount of pressure there and then, but they have to understand how we can manipulate those pressures into our advantage. And if we, everything in terms of the representativeness of training and stuff, and we're putting ourselves in these constant uncomfortable zones where we can explore these things, yes, by all means, we would learn those lessons out in the games and we can progress. But yeah, I had to use, to answer the question, I had to find a way. The only way I could find it was in a very critical game that could have got us into a semi-final and ultimately could have resulted in another tournament win. However, I knew the importance of where we need to go as a team in that particular moment. So I sit back and watch them fail and perhaps encourage, because I just sort of gave a little bit of a nod on the sideline, because as you can imagine, they would look over and go, what is he got to say? And I just sort of sat there and a smile on my face, sort of hoping they're going to fall into the trap. But as you can imagine, everyone else wasn't too happy. But I hope that answered the question.
There's some videos of you throwing water bottles and punching walls and all these things.
Definitely when I've got Fletcher's hat on, that Springbok hat, I'll be doing that.
There he is. Look, that's a fantastic story. I felt like I was there. That's awesome. I want to be respectful of people's times. I know it's been chaotic. I can barely keep up with the banter in the chat that's going on. Thank you for making my life so easy. Look, I've got a feeling this is a chapter 1 of a series of loads of things. I know that there must be, I don't know, another 20 questions that we haven't been able to get to. I know there's loads of you guys and loads of grassroots coaches want to reach out to people like yourselves. So from me, it's a massive thank you for this hour, for this time. Again, I'll reach out soon and see how we can continue the conversation, because again, there's loads of things for going around. Parents seems to be a big thing. There's lots of resources flying and suggestions and stuff like that. So anyway, I'll leave you to open your mics to say your final goodbyes. It'll be chaotic again, and thanks once again. Hopefully we'll sort out the Spanish version of it very soon, and yeah, we'll have some secret missions for sure on the next one. Thank you all very much. It's been fantastic. Wishing you all the best from here. Stay safe and all the best.
Guys, bye.
Well done, Juan. I love the secret mission for the translator to disappear. That was good.
We'll get it on. Thanks again, guys. See you soon.
Cheers, guys.
See you, man.